My name is Jonathan Gagliardoni Blanco, and what I want to talk to you all about is about blockchain product market fit. A lot of times when I talk about product market fit or product management in blockchain, people will say things like, oh, that's obvious, or like, I understand, or like, of course. Well, it's not as of course as you might think, and actually one of the biggest problems that all technology companies have, regardless of industry, actually has to do with product management and actually productizing what they're looking to do, as opposed to just coming up with ideas and working on that idea really quickly. So a little bit about myself. I've been a product manager for over 10 years. I've founded a few companies that have been in the retail technology space for the last 10 years or so, which is what led me to start Every. And Every is a retail technology blockchain company. We're based here in Seattle. And then I'm also the founder of Token Forum, which is a media company that promotes and does conferences here in Seattle where we focus on advanced level blockchain topics. Our next conference is actually November 9th. So with that, I want to keep this pretty casual. So I also teach product management at the University of Washington. And so feel free to ask a question as it comes up. Feel free to disagree with me. I don't claim to have all the answers or know all the answers. This is kind of my thought process through how I think about product management when it comes to blockchain overall. So this is an interesting quote by Marc Andreessen, and when it comes to just startups or how an investor might invest in a company, it's very much how they think, right? It's like, hey, has someone achieved product market fit? What is product market fit? Meaning there's actually, it's kind of exactly what it says, there's actually a fit for what you're offering into the market. People actually want to give you their credit card to purchase something, right? So the example I always give my students is, if we were to pull everybody in this room and say who here likes ice cream, right? Chances are most of us would raise our hands, but there's a totally different way to ask that question, and that is, what's your favorite dessert, right? So if I ask people what their favorite dessert is, maybe most people don't. Actually, let's just try that right now. Who here likes ice cream? I like ice cream. Who's here? So then also so if I ask you what's your favorite dessert, does it happen to be ice cream by chance?
Anything with sugar in it.
right. So the kind of the point here is right is that it all depends on, from a product management standpoint, it all depends on how you ask the question, right? So I could probably ask you a question to get the answer that I want, right? And then I'm going to start creating my ice cream company, and I'm building it off of bad data. I'm building it off of bad user inputs that I'm getting, right? So that becomes very important. So. My goal whenever I do a presentation is always to do as little words as possible, so there's going to be little words from here on out. So, I have a problem. Okay, so I start thinking about the solution. What's very common in any company, it's not just pertinent to blockchain, but it also happens in blockchain, is you start solutionizing, you start creating all these reasons as to how you're going to fix it, why you're going to fix it, but have you really figured out what that problem is? And so what's interesting is, most of you probably are aware of in this room, what often happens in blockchain is, I have a problem and the solution is blockchain, right? And it's okay, cool. So I'm going to do blockchain, but what's the actual product that we're going to be building to do this? And so, and after they think about blockchain as being the solution, often it's oh, okay, cool. So now we're going to build this awesome technology solution. So, So with that, I'm going to just go straight into my 7 blockchain product market fit, steps of product market fit. But before we even get to that, I want to give you an example of this company that I remember seeing. I don't even remember the name, but I remember seeing about last year, there was a lot of advertisements back when you could do advertisements in Facebook for token sales. There was a tow truck token, right? So, you might be surprised at my answer on this, but so basically, the thought was hey, we're going to do an ICO to raise tokens for this tow truck token, and you'll have these tow truck coins, and when your car gets towed, you can use these tow truck tokens, right? So that'll kind of be the example that we use as we go on throughout this, right? But so if we think about it, what's the problem here that they're trying to solve with these tow trucks? Or if you're a tow truck operator, I'm not in the tow truck business, but I think it's safe to assume that they probably don't have the most advanced technology that they're using, right? Like, you're going to use a lot of pen and paper, you're going to use a lot of databases, maybe that's probably self-managed and so forth, right? So like, does blockchain make sense there? Maybe. Well, let's think about it. Who else needs to be represented in that whole structure? And we'll kind of get through that as we go through these 7 steps using this as our example. So the first question is, when you're thinking about how you figure out product market fit, is there a problem? Is there an actually problem? Period, right? As simple as that might sound, but what's the real interesting question actually is, does that problem actually need a solution, right? So like, is the person that you're building this for, do they actually care about any solution period, or the solution that you're offering them, right? So I actually used to be, I spent some time in the IoT space when I was working at Sears. I led an innovation group at Sears. And one of the customers were building management folks, right? And in interviewing and investigating and talking with them, a lot of them said, hey, this is very interesting, though I would never use this, right? And like, why wouldn't they use it? It's because they're so used to their workflow that even though they have a problem for it, they're not looking for a solution, nor does that solution seem to solve what they're actually looking for, right? So that's kind of an example. There's like, hey, it may make your life easier, but if the person that's actually using this product doesn't need it, there's an issue there. So yeah, does this product need a solution? If we go back to that tow truck example, hey, let's just, for argument's sake, let's just say that right now they're using pen, paper, and Windows, 2003 to run everything, right? And maybe that's an unfair assessment, but let's just go with that for argument's sake. Okay, so they probably have their filing systems that they're using, their database systems that they're using, how they're storing information. When one of us gets our cars towed, what will happen, right? We'll go there, we'll probably fill out a form. It'll most likely have the 3 receipts where it's like the white, yellow, and pink, and we're gonna have to we get a copy, they get a copy, so forth, right? Well, what happens later on down the road? So later on down the road, that happened to my car. Maybe I want to find out, if you go to purchase that car, maybe you want to know how many times this car has been towed, right? So hey, that makes sense, right? Like, why wouldn't we put that information on a distributed ledger accessible to anybody, right? So that information is in fact valid and is important. So all those might sound ridiculous, like, hey, a tow truck token. Yeah, that probably sounds ridiculous, but hey, automating the process of managing for a tow truck company on blockchain, maybe it's not so ridiculous, because each car, if you have a Carfax to know, when a car has been, had work done on it, or it's been an accident, why not understand when it's been it's been actually towed or taken away? Now, does that mean that it actually needs a blockchain? Maybe not. Maybe it can integrate with something else. So from there is like, again, hey, can this solution be solved manually, right? So if I'm coaching one of the companies I advise, or even in my own companies, before we build anything out, we figure out, how do you do this 100% manually? Doesn't matter how labor intensive it is how would this actually work manually, right? And then what are the steps that you're going to be doing to cut out that manualness? So if it's, maybe you're thinking you're going to create some system, some application that's going to automatically send emails and send notifications and do whatever. Hey, you can do that with a database, you can do that with MailChimp, you could do that with having someone create a Facebook account, right? Of course, you're not going to package that up and sell that, but that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying, like, these are the manual processes that you take to make sure that there's actually a need to start spending money on engineering. I can't tell you how many times I get asked, hey, can you introduce me to an engineer? And I'm like, I totally can. Like, what do you want? What do you want to build? Well, I want to build X, Y, Z, and it's going to do all these things. Like, great. Like, what are the specs? Like, what do you mean specs, right? And so, the most important thing is, like, if you figure out how to do it manually, then you can do it in a technology way. And so the next thing is, like, so once you've figured out this can be solved manually, can you solve this problem with technology? And by solving this with technology, does it in fact automate the process? Does it improve the process? Does it make it faster, right? So sure, there's going to be a development effort, it's going to take time, it's going to take money, it's going to cost resources, but that ROI should ideally spin up quickly, and that's why you created a technology company to do so. By the way, all of this is what you need with any company. This is not just a blockchain, right? But when it comes now we're going to start going into how you think about blockchain. So this is my favorite thing to talk about, and that is like, does it need a database? Okay. Are there multiple people that don't trust each other that need to audit this information at some point in some hypothetical future and would need access to this information in a hypothetical future? Then let's start thinking about blockchain, right? Everybody has different, kind of points of views on this, but there's a lot of these like single, private, single-use blockchains. Like that's all nice, but you can just use, encrypted databases, right? Like it's not necessarily a need for full-on blockchain. And by the way, I'm, this is my opinion. I like to think about the right now when we talk about blockchain. I also like to think about the future, right? So like a lot of times you'll see people talking about either or. For right now, based off of the rules of the road that we have, sure, like that's why we would do it, everything internal. But maybe in some hypothetical future when blockchain may in fact be good, sure, you might figure out some internal structure for that. But again, it's just a better database than perhaps we have today. So if we go back to that tow truck example, and we think about people who need to understand what's going on with this particular car, it would be a dealership in the future. It would be the person buying the car in the future. It would be the tow truck company in the future. It would be perhaps AAA. It would be maybe the city to understand if it's the state of this car. So there's many different people that could play into this. Now, does that mean that we need to create a tow truck blockchain? Maybe not though, right? But would AAA or some car manufacturer benefit from having their own blockchain, and then you could track that car all the way throughout its entire life? That starts to make a little bit more sense. And now this tow truck company or tow truck token, maybe it's not a blockchain, it's a dApp, right? It's a dApp on top of one of these existing blockchains, so then that information can be put through. You don't necessarily need a tow truck token. That tow truck company can leverage someone else's token, in the blockchain. And to get to blockchain, right? Does it actually become more efficient? Is it more secure? Is there a benefit to being actually on blockchain? I hear that a lot. Hey, like that doesn't belong on blockchain because of X, Y, Z, or there's too much data, or there's too much, it's too heavy, or it would cost too much. I don't think those are good reasons to say something doesn't belong on blockchain, right? Like that means like it perhaps doesn't belong on blockchain in its current iteration, of course, but as far as what it should be, there obviously will be a world where more data, more information fits on blockchain, right? That's going to happen. The real question is, does it need to be auditable? Do multiple people need to have access to it? And again, when you're creating your product offering, like you're going to be creating personas, right? So everybody here that has a company or spinning, you probably thought about like the different personas of your company or the people that are involved in the process of purchasing, right? So if those people don't trust each other, then again, that's why you need blockchain. And so last is going to be tokens, right? So not every blockchain needs a token, as obviously most of you realize that. But in this example of the tow truck company, would anybody actually buy tow truck tokens, right? Like so, and at least obviously that if you're buying it for utility, how often do you actually get your car towed that you need to have like this utility token of doing so? Is it really a utility? Probably not. And however, though, if there was some sort of car token or some sort of ecosystem token around, the auto industry, and you could then use that token interchangeably with your oil change to when you purchase a car in the future to whatever, and the tow truck is a DApp or something that sits on top of it, now that starts to make a whole lot more sense as to why you would use blockchain. So it's really important to bifurcate all the reasons as to why you would or wouldn't do something, right? So like, just because there's different parties involved, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean it means blockchain, but if it does, it doesn't necessarily mean it needs tokens. And something might be interesting in a token economy, but not necessarily need its own blockchain, right? Like all these things are not necessarily interchangeable. And the one thing that I always say is when you think about blockchain and tokenization or cryptocurrency is that blockchain and cryptocurrency are symbiotic, right? Like they work well together, but they're not synonymous, right? They're not the same thing. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here and everybody understands that, but I think that's a really good way to explain it to people that don't get how that works, right? And so when you are building a blockchain or a product, when you're trying to productize how the company works, and this is kind of in closing on this, is that from a product management standpoint, you're actually product managing several aspects of building a company when it comes to a blockchain company, right? So first, you're product managing the actual technology, not including blockchain, right? So first, you're doing that. Second, you're product managing like the token economics or the token structure and how it goes into the blockchain. Third, the actual blockchain itself, like how you're actually going to be doing the blockchain. And then governance of the actual company, right? And like sure, like this can be spread out amongst a lot of people, but really you need to be able to product management those functions throughout. So what I mean by product management is, hey, you're ideating off of it, you're figuring out who the players are, you're taking it through the validation cycle, you're understanding why, who, when, how it works, and so forth. And really that's all I got. So again, here's your basically your 7 steps of how you would think through the product market fit behind your actual blockchain. And you know, with that, I'm happy to open up for questions or comments or disagreements.
You pegged it. You nailed that.